Okay, hear me out. Anamorphic live streaming. Now, it's been almost a year since I lived in my old apartment where I would set up everything in my living room, and that's where the majority of my YouTube videos came from. But since then, I've moved up one floor and I have my own office, at least, well, half of an office. I have to share this one. I wanted to go over some of the different setups I use to actually create some of these videos. When I'm not out in the field or when I'm not traveling, typically you're gonna see a lot of the content back here. And one of the things I also want to cover as well is the trend and the rage of anamorphic live streaming. But well, we'll get there. Now, today's sponsor is actually going to be Desky, because one of the things I needed to do to complete my office and to make sure there's not too much clutter on my main computer desk is to get a secondary desk to prep my cameras and some of my other gear. Desky was kind enough to provide a desk, a mouse pad, a chair, and some other accessories as well to make that workflow a little bit easier. But we'll talk about that a little bit later, actually just throughout the entire video, because it does have context into this whole office setup. Now, first things first, I'm gonna mention the main camera for some of these YouTube videos, at least when I'm shooting stuff in the office, and that's gonna be the A7C Mark II. I've actually never made a video about the A7C Mark II, but I've had this camera for quite a long time now. The reason why I like this camera is because it's small, it's compact, it has a downsampled 4K sensor, which gives you a lot of quality, and I'm used to grading S-Log3 footage. You also get the ability to have a hot shoe where you can connect a bunch of different mics to it, because right now I'm using the ECM B10. Another thing that I'm also using on this A7C II setup, and probably you're going to see a little bit more often, is this 10mm Laowa lens. I did a video on this lens before, and it's a cartoonishly wide lens, but it is a lot of fun, especially when I want to be super annoying. Now, the stilts that this camera actually sits on is going to be the Fallcam Tree-Root tripod. Now, this tripod doesn't stay inside of my office every single time because when I travel, it's the only one that's travel safe. But one thing that I do like about this is that it does have a quick release plate. It's fairly easy to use and it fits in my office just fine. It also gives me the ability where I can move around and I don't knock over my tripod and the camera on top of it. Also, just a weird lighting tip, if you ever wondered why this is always a screensaver on my computer, this actually plays into being more of a practical light in the room. We'll talk about practicals when we get into the lighting side of things. Often people will use things like lamps and different lights in order to be practicals or different things to give kind of tone and motivation to a room. I use a screensaver because it matches the walls and most of the clothing that I wear. We'll also maybe talk about some clothing and stuff like that and why I pick the clothes that I do, which isn't the most important thing in the world, but some people asked about that. Now, today might just be a video about cameras that I've actually never made videos about, but I've had for over a year. And the other one's going to be the Lumix S5 IIX. Now, I've had this camera since like last April, and I've been using the S5 II back and forth because I begged and borrowed it. And one of the things I honestly had a little bit of an issue with was its autofocus. And then when Lumix fixed the autofocus, well then I used it a lot more. But this is actually my dedicated top-down camera. It's been taking me a while to actually get a dedicated top-down setup since moving into the new office, which is why I needed a secondary desk to begin with. Now, in terms of the lens I'm going to use on this guy, I'm using a Lumix 24mm because I'm shooting in open gate. If I need to shoot things for vertical or in 16:9, having open gate's really handy there, especially when I have to do those fancy unboxing reels, which now I can finally do because I have a setup that's able to do so. This also is the requirement of having the Desky desk. Now, I picked a walnut finish because it matches other things in the room. It's around the same tone as kind of being an earth tone, but at the same time, it's different enough that if you take a wide shot of the office, when I finally decide to clean it, it makes a lot more sense. Now, one of the other things that Desky offers is that it does have a drawer that you could fix into the desk itself. This is obviously a sit-stand desk and it has the controls on the right-hand side, but I also have the drawer where I can store my memory and as well as a little groove under the drawer, which you could plug into power ports that you could get separately for the desk, so that way you could charge your batteries with it being discreet, not taking up too much clutter. The drawer that I have in my desk typically is for my Lumix batteries because I have 3 Lumix cameras at this point, so I do have a lot of batteries, and being able to put that inside of the drawer, just pull a battery out whenever I need a charged one, is a way of doing that in a nice clean way, and at the same time when I want to get top downs on that S5 IIX, I can do that in a simple way without worrying about a battery being dead. Now, in terms of the desk arm that I put on the setup, I actually am using one by Small Rig. Now, I've had one before and it kind of started to fall apart. It didn't have the highest payload in the world, but I do like the Small Rig one quite a bit. The arms themselves are pretty sturdy and they tighten down pretty nicely, and the fact that it could store a camera that's the size of the S5 IIX with a 24mm lens, it has more than what I need in terms of something that has a payload that can hold for top-down shots. Okay, so this is the moment we're all waiting for, and it's how you actually get these anamorphic live streams, and we're going to be talking about, well, the Blackmagic Pixis and using it for live streaming. Is that overkill? Absolutely. But is it fun? Well, absolutely. Now, obviously we're going to be using the Blackmagic Pixis. This camera has a lot of capabilities, and as well as Blackmagic has a pretty strong brand in doing broadcast and live production, and the Pixis is no different because you can do it fairly easily. Now, this is going to be the camera package I'm going to use, but I'm also going to have the Blazer 45mm lens. This is gonna go on the front of my Pixis, and it's gonna be my main lens for live streaming until I pick up a 33, which I think might fit a little bit better because it's close quarters in this room, but nonetheless, this is pretty handy and pretty trusty. Now, one thing you might notice that I have been talking quite a bit about using circular polarizers and that everyday filter by Short Stash, which I actually use on the front of this Blazer Remus lens when I'm doing live streams. The thing is that when I use key lights inside of my room, especially in close quarters, I might get like a harsher highlight on this side of my face, and there is a way that you could kind of grade forward a little bit in DaVinci Resolve, but using that filter helps out a little bit more because it's more practical, and especially because you're live and I can't put a glow effect and all the other stuff in order to get rid of that. Now, back on the live streaming thing, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that you can't just plug this in by USB-C if you want to do it in Anamorphic. You do have to get this 3G recorder by Blackmagic, which is pretty small, it's pretty compact. You do need to use a Thunderbolt 4 cable and able to do it, but you also have to make sure that you're still using SDI protocol because this is an SDI in order for you to plug the SDI cable into your camera. Now, I use 12G SDI, I just have this cable anyway, there's no particular reason, but this is the two things that you need in order to live stream in Anamorphic. You also want to make sure that you have your menu settings set correctly, and to make sure that you're de-squeezing in the monitor option on your Blackmagic Pixis, or it's not going to display a de-squeeze image if you're using an anamorphic lens. Now, audio can be forgiven if your visual quality is bad, and we talked about some high quality cameras, but that doesn't mean your audio can be lacking. Now, for live streaming, I will use the Shure SM7 Plus. It's a little bit different than the Shure M7 because it does use a different USB connection, and USB-C is just something I have a lot more cables of. And if I lose that little micro USB that happened on the other one, it was really annoying because I didn't have any other cable that actually matched it. In fact, also the port on the USB-C-A on my Shure M7, it fell off. So, well, I'm not using it anymore now. I also want to point out that I am using some Technics headphones as well, which are the EA800s. I actually didn't have to pay for those because Lumix gave us headphones on the way to the Norway trip. So, I don't know, shill all you like. But I also use Sony XM5s, which I also get those from Sony as well. I'm very grateful that some of these things are free. But however, I use the EA800s as my desktop and my live stream headphones, especially if I want to listen to things while I'm doing an edit, or if I want to have headphones to monitor my audio while I'm doing a live stream. Now, if you want more information about the Desky desk that I picked up as a secondary desk as my camera prep table and my top-down setup, I did pick up a walnut 48 by 30 inch Desky sit-stand desk. Sit-stand desks are pretty common. You could raise it up and raise it down depending on how you want to use it. I would let you count how many times I've used the standing feature on it, but one thing that I do like is the ability to add things like different drawers or different power sources to it to make the desk a little bit more functional. You can install outlets to the back of the desk, plug that into your main outlet, and that way I could use things like chargers or power different cameras or power different accessories or practical light on the desk. So not only does it give you more function just as a desk, but I can put things like fancy lamps in the back in order to add a little bit more motivation to a room. You have the ability to set up other accessories. Now, I talked a little bit earlier about how I set up the drawer, and that's a way that I could store some of my memory cards and as well as have a discreet way of charging some of my batteries. But also because you can hook up different outlets to this desk as well, it's great for things like cable management, or if you want to have a fancy lamp that goes on the desk, so that way you have a little bit more motivation if you want to be more, well, cinematic. Also, on the little module where there is a sit stand feature, you do have a USB-C cable there as well. That way I can charge some other accessories that are easy to access and also just look nice on the desk. For the most part, this is gonna be where my iPad sits, especially when I need it for different things or I wanna get out of the office but I still have to do some work. It's a great way to charge that thing up and not just kind of leaving it sitting willy-nilly on the desk. Overall, it just looks really pretty, and it's nice that you have a USB-C that's capable of charging while actually on the desk as well. Desky also sent me their ergonomic chair as well. One of the things that was a little bit of a bother, especially on my lower back, especially after years of doing a lot of powerlifting, is that when I spend a lot of time sitting down, editing videos or doing live streams or whatever the case might be, my lower back tends to hurt. Muscles tend to get tight as you get a little bit older. It might not crack on this side of things, but it definitely cracks around my spine. And having a chair that's going to be comfortable when you're spending long hours sitting is something that was a lot more important than I thought it would be. I had an old rickety chair that I got for free on the side of the street for a long time, and that caused a lot of back pain. So having something like an ergonomic chair alleviates some of that back pain, but at the same time, you still want to work out, train, focus on your mobility. This isn't going to fix everything. It's just not going to make some of the problems you already have even worse. And you thought you can escape Uncle Kofi. He will always be here in videos to give you the Ghanaian language of the day. So today's video, we're going to talk about a word called boame. Boame. Because sometimes your Uncle Kofi, yeah, he needs help. Oh, he's a very good person, but he is not perfect. He cannot do everything. He cannot go to the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. He cannot make sure you put a like on the video. So sometimes he needs a bit of help. So when you need help, when you need someone to help you, you say boame, boame. which means you also have to make sure you help Uncle Kofi and you go and press the subscribe button. And Yeboah me to make sure we maybe get to 60,000 subscribers. I want to see maybe 60,000, maybe 80,000, but we start with just one. So if you want to boah me, make sure you click subscribe. Make sure you like to, make sure you comment and do all of those tints. Back to the video. Now, if you haven't noticed, there isn't a lot of natural light in this shot. I mean, there is a window behind me, but the window's kind of on an angle pointed towards the wall, and the light coming from here is not coming from the sun, it's just coming from outside. It doesn't look the greatest in the world. So you have to be a little bit more creative with your lighting. Now, here's a couple of tips that you can use in your lighting setup in order to make your life a little bit easier, or at least to add a bit more dimension, which I'm not super perfect at, but I try my best in the dimensions of this room. For one, I'm using a Namelight 60B, and that's going to be my key light. Now, I've actually opted for more smaller softboxes for reasons that mostly revolve around space, but this is a nice, easy softbox to use, and you can get a Bowens mount adapter for your Namelight 60B in order for you to use Bowens mount diffusion or Bowens mount attachments. One thing that I want to point out over here is actually going to be this guy over here. If you haven't noticed, this shot with this little light on top of my laptop's been in a multitude of different videos. One of the things I didn't necessarily want to do is cover my room with lamps because everybody does that. So one thing that I did do is I chose a screensaver specifically to match the rest of the walls, the outfits that I wear, and also to make my skin tone look super nice. I also put a little light on the top of the monitor as well because, well, practicals and cinematography and all that fun stuff. Now, one thing that I am playing with a little bit more now as well is going to be the Namelight 60C, and as well as a projector mount for that light as well. Now, what you are going to notice if I move my head a little bit over here, there's a little light, there's some texture back there. It looks kind of cool. Now, I've seen a bunch of people do this on YouTube and using projector mounts to add a little bit of texture on the walls, and I had this projector mount for quite a long time. I've also said projector mount a lot, but I am using it to add a little bit of texture on the walls until I can put some new artwork. One of the things you can use to actually add dimension to your space is artwork or different things on shelves, but I don't have all the money in the world and I don't have all the space in the world, or I also don't have the artistic vision to find curated art pieces to go on the walls. So this light's gonna do just fine. Now, with a top-down lighting setup, one thing you wanna do is you wanna make sure that your lighting is top-down as well. You still wanna use something like a softbox over top of your desk, but you could also use other supplementary lights in order to add a little bit of an edge, separate some things from the background, especially if it's in your hands a little bit elevated off of the desk, and you could put some things like different plants or different elements inside of that top-down shot in order to add a little bit more dimension, which is something that I hope that I not only demonstrated, but there was enough B-roll to go over the fact that I yapped that entire time. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind as well is that your focal length is going to dictate the different looks you're going to get in the room. Sometimes when I shoot anamorphic, it's going to have a particular look. Sometimes when I'm going to shoot on this 10mm lens, it's going to look like this as well. Now, in efforts to kind of keep this video on the shorter side, which I don't think I did a really good job of, I wanted to go through some of the ways that I set up my room for YouTube videos. And I want to go through some of the things I use, which you might see on this channel or other pieces of social media that probably use my face or, well, my hands. A special shout out to Desky for actually sending me the desk, the ergonomic chair, the drawer, and all the accessories I need to do to make my workflow a little bit easier. Having one desk is great, especially when you have an editing setup, but when you do things like camera prep, top-down shots, or you just need a place to put your practicals and charge some of your batteries, Desky has a lot of the accessories you're able to use to be able to do that. I left a link in the description down below to everything I have on my particular desk setup, so that way you guys can check it out. It's probably also an affiliate link as well, I'll be honest with that. And also the sponsor of this video, so that way it helps me generate these videos where I can tell you just a little bit more that you can use for your own content creation. That being said, I'll see you guys in the next one. I probably yapped for a really long time. Anyways, peace.